We're doing so well.
I know. I love this.
You know, speaking of great starts, I was going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So a few weeks ago, we came out with our first episode. There were admittedly some issues. There were some issues with the second episode that hopefully the audience never finds out about.
Great.
Hopefully they are unaware.
This is our secret.
That anything happened. And we fixed it for them. But it got me thinking about like sometimes how creative people can struggle to get started with something because they want it to be perfect right away.
Oh, yeah.
Is that an issue for you like it is for me?
Big time. Yeah, I have a really hard time with that, especially with first drafts. Like, they're notoriously supposed to be terrible. And I tell that to all of my author friends when they're struggling. I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be shit. You're allowed to make it shit. But that does not apply to me. Mine is supposed to be perfect always.
Right.
So when I'm like writing, I'm trying to like edit as I write or redo a sentence. When I know I'm not supposed to, I'm like, no, let it be crap. You can come back and fix this. But I'm like, no, it should be brilliant the first go. So yeah, no, super guilty of that.
Yeah. So that I think was one of the things that like kept us from starting this months ago. Because like we've been talking about it for so long.
Yeah.
But it was like we had to get past that point of like everything's going to be perfect. And I'll be honest, even when we did start, I was like, we finally got it figured out. Everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
And the fact that it wasn't is going to drive me crazy for probably 2 years. I'm going to have to talk to a therapist about it at some point. But it happened. It's out there now. And like,
we're doing it.
It was our first draft.
Yeah.
And we achieved shitty.
Yeah.
I think I hope we achieved better than shitty. And now we'll just keep revising as time goes on.
For sure.
So, yeah, I was just curious of like, if that was a thing for other people than me. Because I know it affects me in my day-to-day work too. And that sometimes it can feel like starting is the hardest part because it doesn't, you're like not totally in the zone and you're not sure that what you're doing, even in that day, like even if you're on like day 3 or 4 of recording, it's like, oh, but I'm not really hitting it and I'm not firing on all cylinders or whatever other metaphors.
Right. That we can sprinkle in.
that exactly. That we can apply to the situation. And like, this is like, it's good. I think it's going to be therapeutic to like be doing this and know that it can't be perfect, that like shit is going to happen.
Yeah.
And hopefully the audience comes along for the ride with us.
Well, and I'm hoping too, it makes us feel more relatable and more human and things like that because we are creative people and people read our work or listen to your audiobooks. I feel like that makes it harder for people to not so much relate to us, but harder to connect because we're placed on a different kind of platform. Whereas like, we're just people. We're just winging this. We're trying to do our best. And there's a lot of, duct tape and bruises and bumps along the road when you create anything. And that's just a universal human thing.
Right. So. Yeah, it's interesting to see if people do get to know us a little bit more or the process a little bit more. I do find that like there is, I think, a mystique to what both of us do as an author and as a narrator. And behind the curtain, it is just chaos.
100%.
Or to use another metaphor, like it's the duck going across the water that looks like it's just swimming away and looks beautiful and graceful, and like underneath it's paddling like hell.
Feet, 100%.
We're that.
We're the feet.
We're doing that all the time. But like nobody gets to see that because that's not the version we put on TikTok for people to see. And like, I see so many narrators putting stuff on TikTok about their jobs. And even I look at it and go, wow, that's so lovely.
Yeah.
Their booth is so pleasant and like their hair and makeup is done and they look great and they just seem to be having the best time.
Yeah. They're so put together.
Forgetting that like, of course, all of that is manufactured.
Right. Yeah.
There are some I guess TikTokers, you call them, narrators on TikTok who like record live, which I think is a closer representation of what life can be. But even that, like I have such a hard time relating to because I'm like, how can you have people watching you?
That would drive me crazy.
Stay in the moment.
Yeah. That would be terrifying.
Like, there's just always going to be that part of my brain that's thinking, like, somebody's watching.
Yeah. Well, it's like that thing. Have you ever, like, you have no problems typing, but as soon as somebody's watching you type, you can't spell to save your life, or like you forgot where all the keys are?
Yes.
Like, yeah. I can't imagine that, like trying to perform and like it's different. I think if it's like a play or something, you're reading lines and things
you
like
rehearse
that.
for that
Right.
to happen.
Yeah.
You do it again and again until you're comfortable enough to be in front of an audience.
Yeah.
That is not what narrating is.
Yeah, no, it's totally different.
You're performing it mostly for the first time because you need to get it done.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm sure like you wouldn't want somebody like watching your Google Doc as you're typing out a story and like commenting in live about like, oh, I don't know about that line of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who needs that? I don't know.
Because even if the person watching wasn't giving that critique, in my head, I'd be anticipating their critique.
Yeah.
So all of that to say that like nothing we see online about what we do is probably the full unvarnished truth.
Right.
But dear readers, we're not varnishing here. No. We're just going to talk about our lives.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I finished a book today.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not mean to denigrate authors, but there is a thing that I would like to talk about.
I'm here for you. Everyone's here for you.
We've talked about it before.
Oh, I know what's coming.
I bring it up all the time. 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking epilogues.
The amount, I'm going to start keeping tally of how many times you stomp out of your booth, go through the office and go,
stomp.
You were always like fucking epilogues every time. Like you were so done. And it's so funny. So yeah, I'm just going to start being like, fucking
stomp.
You just seem so annoyed. Like you just go through.
Like a toddler?
No, not like a toddler.
Fucking epilogues. No.
It's not toddler level.
It's very graceful.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You float.
Thank you. I float on by while cursing eloquently.
Yeah. It's the duck.
Let's preserve this for the record. Yeah, it's just, and again, like not to denigrate the authors, not to denigrate the readers who love that part of the story.
Of course.
But if you are in my position, and this is your job, and you've gotten all the way to the end of a thing you're supposed to do, and then your boss was like, actually, I'm going to tack on this one little thing. Yeah. And then you also have to do that. So you're not done yet.
Yeah. Oh, like, were you on your way out? Are you done for the day?
Actually, no. You're not. And like, that's what it feels like because you've worked the story arc and the arc is finished. Yeah. And you're like, I'm done. Except I'm not. Yeah. And that's when I get out of my booth because I always have to get out of my booth. Yeah. And I have to walk through the office and just be like, fucking epilogues. So that's my rant about epilogues. I know I'm not convincing anyone to stop writing them.
I write them in my books and I'm always like, sorry. I always would have put like a secret note somewhere in there being like, sorry, Kirt, because you're eventually going to read this.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. They're like they're a part of the universe.
Yeah.
They are a part of romance. It's the happily ever after, but then we want to know what happened. Yeah,
it's a nice little like, not bow on top, but like, I don't know, extra little treat at the very end.
It's icing on the cake.
There you go.
You know, like it confirms for the people who might be nervous about it that like, no.
Everyone's happy.
Yes, like that. It really did work out. It wasn't just like a blissful 2 months and then they fought about what kind of dish soap to use and that was it.
Yeah, although that would be kind of funny, like to go into like an epilogue where it's been like 3 or 5 years into the relationship and they're having like one of those established couples argument about something ridiculous. Like, I might have to do that.
You know what? That would actually, that might be an epilogue that I'd be happy to read.
Okay.
But for the most part, I'm just admitting it.
Yeah.
I get to that point in almost every book and I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Also, sometimes it is years later and often I would say like if the characters are young adults in the main book and they've aged 5 years, like there's this part of me that's like, do I need to age up their voices? Oh. And I will admit that's one of the things that over the years I have let go of trying to be that like, okay, they'd be this much more gravelly 5 years later.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Stop that.
Yeah.
Stop that.
I appreciate that like thought though. Like that's a good point, but yeah, I think probably not necessary.
You just gotta let people's voices be what they are.
Yeah.
As long as they're in their early 20s, by the time the first part of the book ends, the epilogue is a few years later, it's fine.
Yeah.
They were already adults.
Right.
So.
Right. That tracks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is like the very first book I ever did was Wolf Song, where one of the main characters starts at 10 years old.
Yeah.
And eventually at the end of the series is in his 20s. And so like there did have to be growth and change.
Yeah.
But yeah, over the years, I've told myself I was being ridiculous and I just needed to record the damn epilogue.
Yeah.
And give these characters their happily ever after later.
Yeah.
You know?
They're later ever after.
They're later ever after.
Sure.
So yeah. So what are you working on?
So I am still working on Dallas's book. That's going to be like my default answer for a hot minute. But I actually got a good idea for like some relic shorts. So when I'm not in the mood to do chaotic necromancers with vampires and stuff, I'm doing little relic side stories. So
amazing.
Yeah. So like just like flash fiction, fun stuff, because at this point, the core series is like wrapped up. Like I've got some other ideas for later things, but this is going to be just like slice of life fun stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to write this like for
fighting
fun.
over the dishes.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun little arguments about them things. So
what would happen if people who could turn into dinosaurs got really upset about the dishes?
I think they would just eat the dishes. They're like, I'll solve this. It just, yeah.
Go buy some new dishes.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fun.
Yeah, it's kind of cathartic. Yeah, it's been fun. I like set Dallas aside last night and just wrote for like an hour of just nonsense, and it was just good. It's fun. It's like I'll probably not use what I wrote so far because it's just goofy, but it was just fun to be in that like creative space within that universe because it's so easy to slip into.
Yeah. So, is it good to take a creative detour like that sometimes?
It is for me. I really like especially if I'm writing something dense, like a very world building heavy series like the Wild Contracts, being able to step aside and just do something either just for me or in a totally different universe with a different voice, kind of like a palate cleanser kind of thing. So I can go back into it with a fresh perspective, or I don't burn myself out. So.
Yeah. I wish I could do that, but no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going to be like,
I'll
go record part of this other book and then come back. No, that's not how it would work.
Yeah, it would probably throw so many things off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, I look forward to hearing more about those. Where might people have access to these special relic shorts?
I don't know yet. I mean, we've got some avenues of places I can sprinkle them in coming up soon-ish.
I wonder. All right. Well, so as we continue on our rolling out the Patreon tour, in every podcast, we're sprinkling some more information. We're about to sprinkle some more.
Yes.
Including, we have a launch date picked out.
Look at us.
Much in the theme of like just starting, even if it's not perfect. That's what we've decided we need to do. Yep. Otherwise, we'll procrastinate until it never happens.
Yes, we will.
So we have decided we are going to launch the Patreon next Friday.
Yes.
That is September 15th. You will be able to subscribe officially. And there are going to be 2 tiers. Would you like to talk about the tiers? Yes.
So we've got a base tier that's going to be $5. So that's jumping on to support the podcast. You get access to our bonus episodes that we're going to be doing, as well as, of course, helping us make the podcast better. But then we also have a $10 tier, which makes it to where you can access future awesome audiobooks that will be coming out that Kirt will be recording.
Yeah, at least for now.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if maybe someday we could like hire other narrators to narrate
cool.
for us, or like co-narrate with them too. But yes, for now, it is going to be Kirt Graves Productions.
Yes, exactly.
Present, yes.
Yeah.
For these audiobooks. And the first of those is going to be, we talked about this already.
We have.
The first one is going to be Gardens and Ghosts, the final book in the Relic series. It will be the only place you can get this audiobook.
Yes.
Will be through our Patreon or our online store.
Yes.
So how is that going to work?
So with the online store, you don't have to be a Patreon or patron, I guess, to access the store. So if for whatever reason you can't support the podcast through Patreon, which is fine, you can jump onto our online store and snag audiobooks. I'm sure we'll have merch at some point, like cool stuff like that. So you can jump on and snag things and support us that way.
Yeah. Essentially, anything we ever offer will be available to the public, but it will be at like full price.
Right.
And then the people who are doing the audiobook tier in our Patreon, they will get every audiobook that we produce. They will automatically have that for them because they are in that tier.
Right.
And they own that forever and ever, amen. Whether or not they stay a Patreon patron or not.
Right.
And then for the people who are patrons at the $5 level, but maybe don't want to commit to having like every single audiobook delivered to them every month.
Right.
Again, they'll be able to access the store and they'll have a little discount.
Yeah, just as a treat.
As
an
just
extra little like
okay, you are a Patreon member, you're going to get, you're not going to have to pay full price for the store. But they are going to have to buy that content separately or bite the bullet and become a dear listener level Patreon supporter for the extra few bucks a month. So that is what we're doing. And we talked about keeping it affordable. I hope that is what we have done.
Yeah, that's our goal. Because we don't want it to make it to where it's so expensive or unobtainable for people that it makes it, hard for people to enjoy everything that we're coming out with. So we're trying to keep it low. It's more of a like the more the merrier kind of situation.
Exactly.
Like, invite your friends to like us. We don't have like these like $30, $40 tiers with like all this crazy stuff.
Right. Which would also be like sort of just like crazy extra work for us, which like, hey, get us enough subscribers and make this our full-time job and we will come up with some crazy extra tiers.
Right. Yeah.
But for now, we would mostly just like more people to enjoy what we're creating.
Right.
So to that end, next week, we're going to be talking about what the different things are that we plan to start creating when we hit certain numbers of subscribers.
Right.
So, little preview for what we'll be talking about next week. So when they subscribe on the 15th, they will immediately have access to
our fun, awesome little bonus episode. We talked about it last week, so we are reading through all of the Animorphs books. So we're going to be doing book 1. For the launch. So when you subscribe on the 15th, if you're at the $5 level, you get the... Or above. You get our normal weekly episode as well as our Animorphs episode as the bonus for subscribing.
Yes.
So.
And if you've never done that, FYI, you will receive, through Patreon, a personalized podcast feed link that you can put into any of your podcast players, and then you will have access to the Patreon content.
Right.
In that feed will also be our regular episodes. So you only have to have one. You don't have to listen to the regular podcast through one feed and then you're listening to the extra stuff through the other feed.
Nice.
We'll put it all there.
Yeah.
So that you only have one feed if you're a Patreon subscriber. And everything will come there as it becomes available. Also, they will actually have access right away to part of a bonus extended interview. Because as I was editing this week's interview, I was like, this is too long.
Excellent. Okay. That's awesome.
No, there was a really good point to be like, all right, now we're changing the topic. And this is sort of like fun and extra. So it's going to become fun and extra.
Cool.
So
Love it.
Next week you'll have access to regular episodes, our first Animorphs discussion, and then also part of the bonus with our author today.
Cool. Well, yeah, that's a lot of goodies right out the gate then.
I know, right?
Yeah.
One final thing to mention for people who are planning to subscribe and would like to get audiobooks from us either through the store or through Patreon, go ahead, if you don't already, go get BookFunnel.
Yes.
That will be how the audiobooks are delivered. It is both, it's really just an app.
Yeah.
I don't think you go online to access the stuff.
Oh, yeah,
so it's a free account. You sign up for it, download the free app, be ready. Because that is where audiobooks will be delivered and that is where you will play them.
Yes.
So it will be almost like having a Libby app or a Libro FM or an Audible. It's just another one of those on your phone.
Yeah. And the audiobook player on BookFunnel is really sleek. They did a great job. So
love it.
It's not clunky. You don't have to download extra chapters or anything weird. So it's nice.
Right. So, all right. So... anything else you wanted to talk about before we...
I guess the only thing I need to talk about is that for multiple episodes...
Why does this feel like a confession?
Because it kind of feels like one. I had told everybody I wasn't going to be playing any video games. but I lied. So the new Baldur's Gate 3 came out on the PS5, and that's going to be like my entire personality trait for a little while.
Great. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, so, just in case I run in here screaming about romancing vampires and such,
Sure.
you know what I'm talking about now. So.
Well, and you'll, of course, have to let me know how the new Baldur's Gate is different than the old Baldur's Gate, which I am, of course, super
I wouldn't do
familiar
that.
with.
I wouldn't do that to you at all. But I will probably scream at you about different things, because this is like a super high fantasy immersive role-playing game.
Ooh.
But what makes it super fun is that you can romance like everyone. So there's like tons of romance options while you're like fighting dragons and like killing goblins and stuff like that. I'm so excited.
This is me learning that you can romance people in video games.
You so can. And this one in particular, not only can you romance it, but like when you're building your character, they've even got like multiple different genitalia you can pick from. Yeah, I was that is a very detailed peen. Like, just was not expecting that. So, but yeah, this is like for adults.
Spoiler alert, she picked a peen.
Yeah, I picked a peen. And he's a very handsome dragon man, and I'm going to romance everyone. So
excellent.
Yeah, it's great. I'm very excited.
Okay, maybe I'm into video games.
Dude, you're like, no, you can just, I'll tell you.
But I look forward to
stories.
hearing more about your experiences. And yeah, any listeners who are also video game enthusiasts, let us know about it.
Yeah, if you're playing Baldur's Gate, I want to know what you're playing, what your class is, what did you make, who you're going after first. So like, let me hear about it, because we can swap stories.
Excellent. So you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate. It's what we're talking about the next 4 months.
Yeah, basically.
If you have thoughts on video games or about starting things as a creative when you want them to be perfect, anything we've chatted about, you can always reach out to us via any of our socials or hoofandfangpodcast@gmail.com. Or there's a contact us form on the website at hoofandfangpodcast.com. We are so available for comments and chatting.
Absolutely.
We are looking forward to meeting more of you inside Patreon as well. I hope we get to interact with folks there. But in the meantime, hoofandfangpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So this week, our interview is with a new author.
Yes.
And I can say that definitively because this is the first book that he has published. And so I know it's not just new to me. He's new to everybody.
Love it.
He's new. You've probably seen me talking about him on social media and other places, but I am very excited to be presenting our interview today with Craig Montgomery. Craig has always been drawn to the fantastical. Whether it's sword and sorcery, superheroes, or faraway galaxies, he's along for the ride. Happily ever after preferred. He recently moved to the Bay Area with his husband and their 2 cats, where he tries to spend as much time with trees as he can. Cannot relate, Craig. Don't like going outside.
I like going outside sometimes in very nice weather, and I don't like camping. So I'll walk through nature, but then I want to go home.
You know how I love nature?
From like inside?
Through a window. Yeah,
yeah.
It looks great from the inside. But yeah, so whether you're walking through nature or just observing it from indoors, enjoy our interview with author Craig Montgomery. Welcome to the Hoof and Fang podcast, author Craig Montgomery.
Hello. Thanks so much for
It's so
having
nice
me.
to have you here.
Yeah, this is exciting.
I'm especially excited to chat with you because I'm going to be narrating your book.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe when people are hearing this, it's already out. I don't know. We'll find out.
Who knows?
Maybe I have narrated it in podcast land. But as we were recording this, I'm still prepping it. So we get to have a chat about a book that I actually have had the chance to read most of. And I think it's pretty interesting how we got connected, which we'll get into. But before that, can you just kind of tell us, like, who is Craig Montgomery and how did you become an author?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm originally from Louisiana, so born and bred in the Cajun heartland. And I guess becoming an author was like a really weird journey for me. I actually remembered this recently when I was talking to a friend. I started writing in like 6th grade. I wrote like a little story and I illustrated it actually. It was like about a magical raccoon who befriended a wizard and they went on like an adventure into the clouds. It was cute, I guess. But I wrote it for my 6th grade English teacher because she like taught me how to enjoy reading, because previously I'd only done it as like a utilitarian thing. And so I wrote it for her. I was going to give it to her for Christmas. And it was like the Friday before Christmas break, and she had taken the day off. So we had a substitute teacher. But I guess like quick side note, I was homeschooled until 6th grade. So this was my first year of like public school education. So I didn't really understand how a lot of things functioned. So I went up to the substitute teacher and I handed over this story that I'd written for my actual teacher. And I was like, I really want her to have this for Christmas and I won't see her until the break. Can you give it to her? She was like, well, she's not here. And I was like, maybe just leave it and she can like get it before, not really understanding she was like not there. And then I never, ever heard or saw anything about that story ever again.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
This is not the heartwarming story I thought we were getting.
My heart hurts now.
It does get better. So, yeah, I truly to this day don't know if she ever received that story, if she thought it was silly and just like decided not to say anything. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But it really put me off of the idea. Like I took it to heart that she was like, I don't know. And I was like too shy and embarrassed to say anything to her, to ask if she ever received it. So I just kind of like let it go. But the thought of writing stayed in the back of my head because like I had enjoyed that and I wanted to do it. And then actually I didn't really touch it again, like writing at all, until I was graduating from college and grew up in the South, very religious, was still closeted, and I was dating a girl. It was actually like my last girlfriend who I was very honest with her before we started dating that I was attracted to men, but I was like trying to work on it because I was in that space.
Yeah.
And she decided to like try a relationship with me. It was very consensual. But I mentioned to her that I was interested in writing, and she was like, well, just do it. Like, just try. And something about the way she phrased, the way she said that, I was like, oh yeah, I get to give myself permission. No one has to like tell me I can be a writer. And so then, yeah, I wrote a book and it was bad. And then I wrote another book and it was a little bit better. And then I wrote another book and it was, it had some promise. Yeah. So it's definitely been a failure to success situation.
So what book are we on? What A Circle of Stars
This is book 4. This is the 4th like completed manuscript. And the first one that I'm actually like, I mean, I'm very proud of it. And I think it's a good story.
It is.
Yeah,
Let's say that definitively. You. It's a good story. It's a lot of fun. I wouldn't have reached out if it wasn't. So what was like, how did we get to this storyline? Like, what was your inspiration? Have you always been writing in this fantasy realm, or was this like, oh, I'm going to do this now?
Yeah, everything I've written so far has been fantasy. That's always been the genre I lean in. The thing that really attracts me to story is being able to play with magic and like breaking the rules of reality. I think that's really fun. So when I was sitting down to like, I was like, I am going to crack the code. I'm going to write a book and it's going to work. And I was sitting down to try and like brainstorm what it was going to be about. I was actually learning how to read tarot cards at the time. And so I was on family vacation with my husband's family. They go away to a lake every summer. So I brought my tarot cards with me. There was quiet solitude and a lake outside the window. And I did like a Celtic cross, which is one of the kind of basic formats of reading tarot cards. And that's actually how I found Casper, was reading that tarot card. And I think because I was in that space of like tarot, and tarot's really linked with astrology, I just like, it was in my brain. So once I had Casper, who's the main character of the book, I started like thinking about what world was going to go on and how the magic was going to be, and just kind of like stumbled into creating a magic system around astrology. And once I had those two things, like the main character and then the magic that I wanted to like work into, the world just kind of like exploded in my brain.
Can you tell us a little, can you give us the pitch,
Sure.
the elevator pitch on the book?
Oh yeah. So, I'm not very good at pithy, but I'll try.
We got time.
Casper is an 18-year-old boy from Earth who is kind of like super down on his luck. Everything has fallen apart in his life. His family has abandoned him because of his sexuality. And on like his first day of not really having a life, he gets attacked by these like demon coyotes. And in the middle of saying like, what is happening to me, a bunch of people in these like cool, colorful robes show up and like kill the demon coyotes with magic. And then they abduct him across the universe to another place where he's told he's like a star chosen hero, and he's got this whole like role to play in their society. And very quickly he realizes that he actually wasn't brought there for like his own benefit. He has a role to play for them, and there's a lot of political intrigue and societal things that are happening that are a little fishy. So he gets kind of embroiled in that, trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. And he meets Helix, who is the grandson of the governess of this new city. And sparks fly. They have lots of little chemistry. And together, they kind of have to figure out what's going on and what they can do to try and help things get better, because stuff around them is like really falling apart.
So I knew Kirt was excited about this book, so I went onto your TikTok and like started scrolling through and stuff. The video where you talk about that pitch was basically what was like, I was like, okay, you already had me at magic, but then it like took off in my brain when you said that it was going to be in space, like a different universe kind of thing. I was like, okay, sold. That is the coolest freaking thing. I mean, demon coyotes already pretty dope, but like going into space, like I love that queer sci-fi is really going more into space. Like there's more of those stories like coming out, because I of course love high fantasy and urban fantasy and stuff, but I'm like, we need more queers in space, damn it. Like I'm just excited to see that.
Yeah. Queers in Space is my favorite tagline. I think it's so much fun.
Can you talk a little bit more about like the magic system?
Yes.
Sure.
I know that Maz was interested in.
Yeah, I have it like circled. I was like, I have to ask him about his magic because it sounds so cool. And I know it's, like you mentioned, it's based off of the astrological science. And I know you also go into like super in depth on your TikTok.
It's very
about
complex.
So it's very complicated. So I'm not going to have you like spell it all out now.
But like dear listener, dear listener, you will not leave this podcast fully understanding it.
Yes.
I've read most of the book, and I couldn't like, I could give you broad strokes, but like this man has figured it out.
That's intentional.
He has figured it out.
I didn't want it to be like a dissertation in the book where you were coming away as an expert. As much as I love magic systems and like that's so much fun, I know even I can get bogged down when there's like so many rules. So in the book, it's very much what you need to know is given to you while you need to know it. But yes, the system it's fully developed and very complex. So it centers mostly around the sun sign. So in astrology, there's like full charts with all kinds of details, and basically like not only where your constellation is, but also planets and where the moon is. So that's very complex, which was going to be too many moving pieces. So I boiled it down to your sun sign that you're born with. And I used the basic 12. There was a 13th added a few years ago. I didn't play with that one.
What?
It's like
there's a new astrological sign?
I didn't know.
I didn't even know.
Yeah. I don't know how like widely accepted it is, but it was a big deal on like my little corner of the internet when it happened. So yeah, your sun sign. But I guess the easiest way to explain it is like we in the world building astrology here on Earth is very much based on what we can see in the sky. And then in this world, that expands to not only where the stars are according to Earth, but how the entire cosmos of the universe is sort of interacting with each other at a time. So just to kind of make it make sense that people across the universe have like the same 12 formulations. So yeah, your sun sign, the time that you're born, that sign associates with a specific type of power. So there's not like a multitude of things you can do with magic. Each sign has a very kind of narrow field of ways that they can be superpowered. And they do that through aether, which is, you can think of it as like dark matter, the stuff that's spit off from stars dying or when stars are born. It's called stardust in the book. So yeah, that's an energy, like a wavelength that human bodies interact with. And the reason these humans are on the other side of the universe is because it's near a celestial nebula where a lot of stars are born and die. And there's more of that aether to be able to do stronger magic. So yeah, I think that's kind of the nesting for the magic and how it works. I think that's probably the best way to talk about it.
And can I just say, like, one of the things that I find really cool about the way you've set this up is that, like, these people used to exist on Earth. It basically is like the ancient Greeks who, like, looked to the stars. Yeah. And so that's part of, like, the legend of these people whose magic is they were people who lived on Earth who were like, you bitches aren't paying attention to the stars anymore. I'm out. Yeah. We're gonna go somewhere where our powers are like super dope. See ya. Yeah. So okay, so this is, people can find you on TikTok and Instagram and they can find out their own stories, but I'm a Scorpio, so what are my powers?
Okay. So Scorpios have basically the ability to control light. So this in the book is very much used to create illusions. So you can confound and delight people, lots of things like that. And then they also can focus that light into sort of an attack. They can make that energy offensive. So you'll see that as like, they call them shadows, where a Scorpio will create like a clone of themselves made out of light, and that clone will go and attack somebody. And if any point of that clone touches you, it's like a knife slices, because all of the energy zaps into that point of contact and attacks. So it's very much like a sleuthy kind of magician vibe, but also assassin kind of vibe. Scorpios get like two different directions. Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, I'm a Gemini. I don't want to like monopolize this on you. Just like
no. Cool this powers. Is what we're here for.
Okay. Yeah. Well then, yeah. So yeah, my birthday's coming up, so extra fun.
Yeah, I'm a Gemini as well, and also I'm sorry because
great. Love the segue here.
The Geminis. So the other thing about the magic is I really tried to base them in some sense of the personality traits and vibes that we give to signs. So Geminis are an air sign. They're all about communication. And the power that they have is what I often call mind melding. So it's like telepathy, but on VR steroids. So you can share memories, you can create constructs, basically anything you can do in your own brain, you can do with another person's brain. And so you're like sharing imagination. It's a really, really good way to learn because you can recall things immediately as if you've learned them and they're part of your history, but they've actually been given to you by someone else. It's very powerful, and it also is very dangerous, and that is sort of a big part of the book.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know why you said I'm sorry. That sounds amazing.
Well, because you're the bad guy.
Oh. Okay.
Well,
not the bad guy, but
you're the perceived.
Yeah, there's a lot of
not evil,
social
but
drama around us Gemini.
Oh, okay.
You're discriminated against? Is that the better way to?
Yeah. I would say regulated, because it's not. I very much tried to not make it like discrimination that we do for any kind of social status that we would recognize here, because I didn't want the Gemini to be a stand-in for race or class, but I did want to look at how we treat humans and how we use power. So the question is more around like, what can we do? How do we serve the community? And what would it look like if we classed ourselves based on that? So there is that discrimination, but I don't know. I feel weird calling it that, because I very much don't want it to be like a racial thing, because it's not. And the way that I constructed it, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. I was not thinking of it in that in race specifically, but just in a way that like any kind of different faces discrimination. And like often without any real logic behind why one class of people is considered better than another, you know?
Because we just love to categorize ourselves.
Right. And like at some point, one group decides they're better than another group, and that myth or that legend takes hold, and eventually enough people in the class that isn't favored start to believe it themselves, and then we have you know, a society that's trying to like work against that even subconsciously, and so
Gets messy
no,
fast.
I think that's probably the more eloquent way to say is I was trying to mirror Casper's journey is coming of age, coming to terms and acceptance of his own sexuality, his own identity as a gay person. And the Gemini are a way to mirror that journey, and the world building of how they behave, what they can do defines how they're viewed and seen and discriminated against. So I guess I maybe was a little jumped off the gun with the way I responded, but yeah.
No. And, you know, let's talk about religion for a second, because when I was reading the book, one of the things I had in my head is I was like, is this kid like a fellow like Christian who had to go through a bunch of bullshit? And then you have since talked about that on your social media, that is something you've gone through. So I guess, I mean, the book is fantasy, it's queer, but it also touches on themes of religion, all which seem to be parts of your life. Did you know you wanted to keep the religious aspect as a part of Casper's story, or is that something that just kind of happened?
It definitely kind of happened. I wanted the adventure story for a gay boy. That was like what I started off with. And I wanted him to just go and have fun and to not really write too much about the trauma stuff. But when I was reworking the beginning, because something you often do, or I've known a lot of my writer friends do this as well, once you get to the end, you get a better idea of like how the beginning needs to be formed to set up the story. So once I had finished, I was going back and I was retweaking, and I was like, oh, none of this is working. I need to just fully reset up. And that's when the first like 3 or 4 chapters were written. It was actually after everything was done. And I didn't really plan it. I just was writing and it came out of me. And I was like, oh, I guess I have this to express. And so it became so essential and core to Casper's story. And I had to, even though I didn't want to.
Right. Well, and so like you talked about it in the beginning of the plot of the book, like he gets abducted early on. And like, obviously you had to somehow set it up so that could happen without like a bunch of people in his life worrying about like where this kid went.
Yeah.
So were there like other ideas of how you were going to set that up before you decided it was going to be an intolerant family kicking him out?
I thought about a few different things. I'm trying to wonder like how much I can say without giving away too much of like how the story ends up. But yes, I guess I did consider other things that he could have gone through. But something that was really sticking with me is I feel like it's such a quintessential part of the queer experience to have that feeling of having to leave your nest, the one that you were given, and build your own. And because I wanted this to be Casper's story about that, I wanted to make sure that was included, in that I didn't lose my family necessarily. My parents have always been very supportive, even if they've been not very understanding at some points. But now, currently in my life, I have a good relationship with them and I'm very grateful for it. But I still very much identify with that experience of like, I built my life on my own without that support system, even if I still have a relationship with my family. And that is not something I feel like I've been able to experience in the fantasy adventure story, is that character going through that and then building their life. And I wanted that. For myself. So, you write for yourself before you write for other people. And this is the story I wish I could pick up off a shelf and read and like see that piece of myself in. So I had considered maybe his family being supportive, or just a lot of different ways you can go about it. But at the once I was looking at what I wanted Casper to achieve, it was important for him to have that facet of queerness, that piece of that story, for the end to make sense, for it to really feel like he's getting the reward he deserves.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about like the parallels between those fears we have as young people, especially those of us who grew up in some sort of religious system. Because I'm much the same. Like I have a good relationship with my parents. I was never kicked out of the house. And certainly there were times where things were maybe a little fraught, but mostly very supportive. But that doesn't stop you from living several years of your life thinking that like basically imagining the worst case scenario. Yeah. And for some of us, we're very lucky and that worst case scenario doesn't happen. Yeah. But you still think about it. You still imagine, you still make plans like, oh God, what would I do? And there's then for some people in real life, as well as in the book, the worst thing does happen. Their parents just say no and reject them and send them out into the world and say bye-bye. Yeah. And I feel like even those of us who are lucky, there's pieces of yourself that you can't be vulnerable and honest and share. And there's ways that you learn to live and behave that are very isolated, even because you have that like what if, so yeah, that's what I felt. It came out of me even though I didn't want it to, and then I realized how important it was for me to express that experience that I had. Well, and I wonder too how many like young queer men and women who are maybe like my generation or a little bit older had those types of fantasies too, where like in this case the narrative is that one of the things that makes him unique and special is also what makes him like powerful. Like his difference is his superpower. And how many of us grew up with like, oh, if only our difference was our superpower instead of the thing that might make us lose everything that we know and love. Yeah, exactly. Like I definitely related to that, and I related to like the attitude that Casper has when he's like plucked from Earth and is like, well, this is your life now, and it's like, well, things weren't going great down there, so like better this than dealing with the situation I was in back on Earth. Which sometimes you do wonder when you read fantasy. I was like, why is this person not more concerned about what has just happened to them?
Yeah.
I think I would absolutely be that person. Even now, like I'm happily married. I have cats. I get to work with Kirt every day. If an alien showed up and was like, "You're our last hope, and we're going to whisk you away to a faraway galaxy," I'd be like, "Well, it was really nice knowing all of those people, but I'm going to peace out. Thanks."
I'd like to think that I would. I'd like to believe that about myself, but I feel like I'm too much of a hermit in real life that I don't know if I have the gumption for the full space adventure experience.
Right, like I'm the only one? Only one.
Like,
just me?
Did you guys have a up-to-date dossier? Because I'm not in shape. Like, what exactly are you going to need? I'm still going to go. I just don't want you to be disappointed.
Right.
I also love the notion of like an alien knocking on your door and being like, "Come save the universe." And you'd be like, "But we just started a podcast."
Yeah. I'd be like, "Oh, well, I'll send him an email. It's fine. He'll be okay. He'll understand."
Oh my God, I'd be pissed.
I know.
If you just like disappeared.
I'd be like, "Hey, I got abducted by aliens." He'd be like, "No, ma'am."
No, you didn't.
Give me their number. I'm calling.
Right. So how long have you been writing this first book?
That's a good question. I started summer of 2019 and it's summer of 23, so 4 years, but it's not been consistently. I was working full time and put it away for large chunks of time. So those 3 previous manuscripts that I wrote that didn't work, they create this little demon in the back of your head that says it's never going to work. So there was that kind of imposter syndrome thing going on. But something that I didn't really... I'd heard writers talk about this, but it never made sense, like truly functionally make sense in my brain until I got on the other side of revisions about how much a story finds its shape and it's the flow in the revision process. I had this like domino vision in my brain that when you're writing, the scenes should stack up and go, and it sets you up for failure because you can't write a story from scratch and it just fully functions 100% across the board. It's not how the process works. And I just like I wasn't giving myself enough grace, I guess, to understand that I could tweak and figure it out as I went along. So that good old Christian perfectionism was still in the back of my brain, making it difficult. So I really made it a lot harder than it needed to be to polish this manuscript after I had finished it. And that's where a lot of the time came from. And then also corporate burnout of just living in America is soul-sucking sometimes. So, yeah.
We also had a little thing happen in that time.
Yeah,
God, What was it that happened in 2020?
I don't know. I forget. It's just, yeah.
So
that definitely...
I can say it like as a full-time creative at that point, like not a lot of creative things happened. Like things slowed down significantly in 2020 and 2021. Like
it's been a slow climb, I think, for most people who are creative to just kind of crawl out of that muck that was left behind. And like just that alone would be enough to like kind of stomp your creativity and your soul to pieces. But then if you also have any other real life things happening, it's virtually impossible sometimes. But I was going to say, like, now that you've completed a full book and done revisions and stuff, next time you write a book, it should be it won't be 100% easier. Like you're still going to run into those things where you're like, I'm a failure, or this sucks, or nobody's going to read this. Like,
I'm sorry I shout that at you all the time.
I know that doesn't help. but like now that you've gone through all that, now you know to give yourself a little bit more grace when you're on. And I don't know, you probably have already started another story at this point, but I like to remind authors of that. People who have been publishing for years still run into that. I've got author friends who have 3 times as many books out as I do, and sometimes I'm like, hey, you're allowed to have a rough time. Like, it's part of the process. Like, I think it's hard for us to set reasonable expectations for ourselves. Like, why can't I knock out a masterpiece in a year? Like, come on now. It's not how it works. So.
Yeah.
And you're at the part where you don't even have external pressure to
Oh,
be
yeah.
great.
No, yeah.
Wait until people read book 1 and then they're asking for book 2.
Yeah, like a week after it's published, you're going to be like, I released a book. And then you're like a week later, someone's like, hey, I finished it. When's book 2 coming? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Really? Like,
Yeah. I've already seen it
fast?
in my ARC reviews. There's already people being like, I can't wait for book 2. And I'm like, cool.
You're going to have to.
You're going to have to. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely agree. I'm a big believer that every brain and every story is different. And I think it's just such a unique thing that we do that you can't apply the same rules of like, every time I get on a bike, I can do the same thing I did last time and it's going to work the same way. Mm-hmm. That's not the way that storytelling works. And so it's just kind of like constantly pulling your brain back into a sense of like, hey, it's okay. Like, just take your time, give yourself some grace. Remember to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I need that like above my keyboard at all times, being like, hey, you want to do this? You're actually having a good time. Can you remember that? Because right now it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah.